Apparently the problem with the night parrot is a lot of people have mistaken kind of a rather large budgerigars. I mean, it is not a particularly flash-looking bird, which it doesn't have to be, being nocturnal.
Well, it's quite a dumb. It's like overweight, weak call, poor flight, and it does look like a fat budgerigar.
No, it's not a glamorous parrot.
One spring afternoon at the Standard Hotel in Fitzroy, Melbourne, I shared a drink with the celebrated Australian poet, Dorothy Porter.
Birdbrain might mean something quite different, Steve, from what your program is indicating.
I have to be honest, and I hope I'm not disrespectful to Dorothy or her partner or my partner, but I've always had this little crush on her. Hopefully that is hidden and my body language will not surrender that secret. For example, if someone's eyebrows arch when they're trying to be sincere, they're often lying. Okay, that's out of the way. Let's move on and never talk of it again. Dorothy's written poems under the title The Night Parrot.
The night parrot can't be snared for a pet, can't be tattooed on my arm or breast. Possession, consummation are notes in his harsh voice that yield little and chase me like a swarm of bees.
And while she talks to me,
He picks spinifex seeds from my nerves and keeps me fitfully awake.
she triggers a thought that lingers like an orographic cloud snagged on some escarpment.
Don't raid my nest, he pleaded when I had him cornered. Just listen to me. Let's burn our bridges, I replied. Let's pair bond forever. It's a deal, said the night parrot, and sank our courtship to the ocean floor.
And this thought is not just regarding the elusiveness of the night parrot and the mystery that always follows this elusiveness.
Like Mr. Hyde in the mirror, cordially to Dr. Jekyll in the flesh. Don't meddle, I learnt, being overcome by wonder and titanic pressure. Now it's quiet and dark. The night parrot and I sit huddled together on a secret outcrop of sandstone, and like the wide-awake lost child shivering on the silvery rock. I don't know if I'm scared stupid or thrilled to the spine and never want to be found.
Sometimes when I'm socialising, my eyes are open, I'm listening, but only enough to contribute at a fundamental level. I'm making the appropriate sounds and faces, but it's often so I can escape without detection.
Well, both my parents, this Jen and Chester Porter.
They say of only children, if your name is not being mentioned every 14 seconds, you stop listening. Or you would have passed the HSC with flying colours if every answer was Steve.
Steve.
There may be some truth in this, but this does not entirely explain the behaviour. This escape or withdrawal to an internal sunroom or personality weekender. Sometimes it's daydreaming, sometimes it's as simple as not saying what you mean, sometimes it's being distracted by a bird while someone talks to you. But the result is the same, a retreat or escape to another location.
They're so extraordinary, birds. In fact, they're kind of little exquisite dinosaurs, basically. Flying little exquisite dinosaurs. I mean, they're just amazing. And the more work that's being done on them, the more research is showing that they're much smarter, their brains are much more complex.
As philosopher Carl Jung says, we have a number one personality and a number two personality. The conscious self who experiences, records and struggles to survive. The facade we present and hope others will accept. And we have the unconscious other, the inner self. Whatever is absent from our personas will be found in the inner self. Thank you, Anthony Stevens, for your very short introduction to Carl Jung. So as Dorothy explains what the night parrot represents in her poem.
No living ornithologist has reported seeing the night parrot in the wild. And I just thought, a parrot that comes out at night that no one has seen, that may or may not be extinct. And it sort of gave me, I suppose, a sense of a doppelganger. You know, I mean, male poets have their anima, and I sort of used the night parrot. I was, 27 when I wrote this. And I think it was my first really... it's my first really developed poem. I mean, and it's sort of my animus. And it was about my relationship with my my then boyfriend. It was about...
She strikes a chord with me. It unexpectedly prompts me to retreat to my personality weekender. Unlike most weekenders, I arrive at mine instantaneously. I don't have to pack or deal with peak hour traffic. Ensconced there, I can be present socially.
My creative daemon, if you like. So I sort of gave...
And on holidays at the same time. But if the blinds suddenly roll up Whoa, I'm vulnerable.
In a very sort of pantheistic way, I sort of gave them the night parrot.
Some people call this withdrawal selfishness, aloofness, arrogance, shyness, vagueness, narcissism. But everyone does it. Everyone has a weekender for their personality. Or a night parrot.
Because I've never seen one, it can't be the night parrot. But any parrot just fills me with joy. And fills
In my weekender, I have an imaginary deck chair, a small occasional table, less than a hand flop away, a phone that never rings, and it's a short walk to the sea. When I withdraw to this sanctuary, I can reveal everything and act naturally or selfishly without retribution. And I'm always preoccupied there, even when I'm doing nothing. If only we could allow this inner self total free expression. Let it run across the sand, naked, pretending to be an aeroplane, one arm outstretched, the other operating the propeller.
I remember, the sort of the extraordinary scenario when they found that dead, a dead night parrot, not a sort of a fossilised one, that had been hit by a sort of a tourist bus or something. And I thought, look, one dead parrot, it sounds almost like a sort of a Monty Python sketch, does suggest there must be a few living ones, I'd
love this imaginary deck chair to be placed in public and bring the peace and insight I experience at my personality weekender back to the outer world. But I can't. Like the night parrot, it remains elusive.
We interviewed Walter Bowles, who was the actual the ornithologist from the Sydney Museum, and he virtually was having a leak. Yeah. And it was just down beside his foot.
And as I stepped back, I looked down, and I happened to be practically standing on the head of a road-killed night parrot.
That was in 1990?
October 1990.
Yeah. And there have been some sightings from experienced bird watchers even 6 months ago.
Yes, there's been some good sightings in that time. And then at the end of 2006, one a few hundred kilometers from where we saw our arrows, managed to decapitate itself on a barbed wire fence. And someone did find its mouldering little carcass on the ground, and it's made it to the Queensland Museum. And interestingly, it is a young bird, so it does suggest it was something that had been bred within the last 12 months.
Australia's Premier Twitcher Mike Carter thinks he may have also had an encounter with the night parrot. Mike? Mike? Oh, sorry. Didn't realise you were on the phone.
Yeah, and my wife and I were stranded in the desert for 15 days once, and when we were rescued from that, while we were being driven back to an Aboriginal community, I possibly saw a night parrot. That there were two vehicles, and I suspect the vehicle ahead hit it, and there was this thing in the road looking up at us. But since we were just being rescued and it was getting dark, I couldn't really well say to the pilot of the plane that had then obtained a vehicle, or two vehicles from the Aboriginal community to come and get us, that I wanted to stop and see this bird.
Thank you, Mike Carter.
Well, on that note, Dorothy Porter, we might ask you to read a poem or two from The Night Parrot.
Yeah.
So this would be quite appropriate for us.
Okay. A little poem called Scenes from a Marriage 1. How fantastic are these familiar suburbs when the night parrot is driving my car. The ovals, the churches, the school playgrounds, the hardware stores all swish like the high skirts of a Kirchner prostitute. The seedy glamour of memory at its most piercing, where dangerous old perfume from a lover's skin hangs about the streets like a saucy hoodlum, snapping his fingers, smoking an unforgettable cigarette, turning this milk bar, this boring suburb, into El Dorado where the streets are gold, at its most gamey like gory Celtic jewellery. When the night parrot is at the wheel, the top 40 becomes hot ice, and I throw these burning songs from hand to hand with my pulse ticking like a gaudy grenade. It's the jumping blood's answer to happiness. The night parrot drives slowly to counterpoint my exhilarated heart speed.
Gee, it's not very often that you sit in a pub and listen to good poetry, is it? And certainly not from such a celebrated poet. I asked Dorothy about her epiphany bird.
Was there a particular bird, or was it by osmosis perhaps? Parental osmosis filtered through your body. Let's go to that moment.
Well, maybe it was also I was in a relationship with a woman who was also very into animals and birds and so forth, and I think it ended up being something wonderful that we did together. I mean, I think it can be, and I can see why my parents, it's been very much part of their very happy marriage, is bird watching. It is a wonderful thing to do with another person. I've bird watched on my own as well, but when you're doing it with somebody else and sharing these amazing creatures and making lists and doing all of those sort of Aspergerish things that bird watchers do.
You don't keep lists yourself?
It depends. I mean, I don't bother anymore where I live, but the Merry Creek, which is at the back of where I live, in Clifton Hill, is this sort of natural bush corridor, and which groups of very dedicated people have done a lot of native replanting and so forth. And we've got resident flocks of red-rump parrots, and it's quite extraordinary what birds have actually come back. And there's now apparently in Clifton Hill a resident flock of yellow-tailed black cockatoos, which I saw very regularly when I was a kid in the Blue Mountains and just loved them. But they're back. They're in Melbourne, in urban Melbourne.
They've got a great cry too. It's always like stays with you a bit like a disturbing rumour. I find that that call of that's very mournful and eerie. Yeah.
And particularly, I remember as a kid hearing it through the mist in the Blue Mountains. And about 20 years ago, I lived in the Blue Mountains for about 7 years, and in another relationship. And
you move around between those relationships.
Yes, I know. I'm a bit of a serial monogamist as far as...
A bit like the superb fairy wrens. They're monogamous, but shall I say, slightly fickle.
Yes, maybe I have got a touch of the male fairy wren about me. But now we're finding that some so-called female monogamous birds, when they've actually tested some of their offspring, have found that they have spread their favours around a little bit more than people realised.
Well, that's what the superb fairy wrens do. They pretend they're in a relationship, and then every morning they nick around the other back of the bush and have it off, and it only takes a few seconds, and then they're back and nobody's any the wiser.
Well, I don't think I'm that bad, and it normally takes more than a few seconds.
Yeah, so I've heard. What drew you to the cryptic night parrot?
Well, again, I'm going to sound like the fairy wren, but I had a boyfriend at the time.
Well, there is a theme that is sort of that is not that subterranean here in this particular discussion.
I'm trying to keep my love life out of this, but it just seems... maybe it just gives an idea of how intimately part of my life bird watching has been. Anyway, this now very dear friend, but he was my boyfriend at the time, he gave me for my birthday the Reader's Digest Complete Book of Birds, massive book. And I was particularly drawn to the night parrot because there was no photograph of it.
It sounds like a cue for some poetry about fidelity.
Then, in coffee's camaraderie, a silt like lake air, parched white, when the night parrot questioned my fidelity. When the night parrot arrived home, tristesse and watching through smudged glass, the wind savaging a sapling. This trapped tyranny of watching nothing and conjuring violence from the magic powder of boredom. I'm a deserted wife, listlessly watching tomato soup as if it were gone with the wind. It's the dry season. The night parrot is starving and won't mate, can't nest, and finds my water bitter. We're fighting, and I say like a whining suburb, sculpted by Saltbush and Campbelltown land developers. This is your desert, not mine.
So, leaving birds just for a moment, I mean, what are you working on right at this not this very second, but, are you...
I reappear from my weekender refreshed. Hopefully my likeable persona has covered my unexpected weekend escape. Obviously, I just said something humorous. I discovered that Dorothy not only finds me funny, but she loves cricket and all sports and wine. And she finds me funny. Oh, I already said that, silly me. Wait a minute. I said I wouldn't speak of this attraction thing again. Damn, my eyebrows are going up and down like two caterpillars about to hatch. Obviously something spooked my inner night parrot and flushed it out. I wonder if anyone saw it. Wow, that could be a tick for me. The night parrot. What a tick! To be continued. I went out with her and you went out with him. I went out for many years and you went out for some. It's true, it's true. And I met her mother, I drank with her dad. I had those commitments like most boyfriends had. It's true, it's true. My girl got suspicious though we lay up in our bed. I couldn't touch her back when she touched me on the leg. It's true, it's true. But we stepped up to the line on the hockey field. We crossed it when we kissed in the TV room. When we lied and we cheated, we made the most. Our most beautiful sin. Our most beautiful sin. My most beautiful sin. My most beautiful sin. My most beautiful sin. This episode is dedicated to Dorothy Porter, who sadly passed away in December 2008.
I suppose the older I get, the more I'm thinking about the brevity of life, the fragility, the transience of being alive, and the mystery of where we come from and where we're going.
I suppose you're not changing relationships as much now, so you need to to look inwardly for these images.
I mean, may I say something about my, present state of, very happy partnership? Is that if you're not chopping and changing in your life, actually, you have other things to think about. Your life, in a way, if you're settled and in a loving relationship, what you think about deepens.
You have more space for these thoughts.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, that's something I've discovered as I've got older. If you're not spending your whole time sort of chopping and changing and looking for passion and romance and the perfect lover and all the rest of it, if you actually stay in a good and enduring and nourishing relationship, you think about different things. It deepens you. I mean, I hope my imagination is always a fiery one, I think. But sure, things change.
Well, Dorothy, thank you very much for spending some time with us here on Birdbrain, Steve's Definitive.